Okay, I've started recording, so in case anybody wants to go back and review anything, we'll be able to. I'll set that as a link inside this module. So, hello everybody. Glad to see everybody. I hope everybody's well. Those of you that are in the school business or hearing your plans, I know of, or hearing what your district's going to do. I've mentioned I have three daughters that are teachers, so they're getting their information. Looks like my wife and I are going to be a lot of babysitting the next month, because they said that they're going to make them come to work, but their kids can't go to school, so it's kind of a problem. So
I think
hope
that
it.
just changed about 30 minutes or not too long ago, Dr. Helby. So they're saying someone was sued by parents who have a problem with students not being able to come to school. So now they're going to open it back up for schools to be able to start earlier than September 28th.
Where is that? Everywhere?
Not sure yet. That's why I said it's hot off the press as I was
Huh.
pulling up in the driveway today. And I'm like, wow.
Wow.
Well, I'm actually going back next Wednesday, and we are on regular starting schedule, and the students will be doing online until I think after the 1st of October, and then they'll have an option to either come to in-person classes or continue to do online.
Okay. All right, let's get started. There is a PowerPoint in your module, but I'm going to bring it up, screen share it. So we'll use that as our guide for tonight. And so here's our agenda. I'm going to turn this on full blast so we can see it all. We felt like when we talked to like the first week that we needed to go back, and there's some value in spending some time talking about your dissertation. So we're going to break into two groups and use a protocol to kind of review, and we'll go over that in a second. So we're going to do that first, and then talk about assignments for Module 4, particularly, go back one step up here to monitoring and assessing. We haven't talked about that much. Your assignment this week, for example, is you're going to be really doing the first two big parts of your final project. What I thought was, I said, okay, we really don't have a full week next week. Everybody's starting to get busy. So I'd say, well, I'll make this assignment, which is basically I would say almost 2/3 of your assignment, your final project is this week's assignment. That'll give me the opportunity to give you some feedback on it. And then there's one section that you'll need to add about monitoring and assessing progress. And we're going to talk about that. I'm going to show you some resources that I use with helping school districts in the monitoring and assessing process. There's a lot of great, I think the best tools out there are the homemade ones, the ones that you develop that are simple, that are in collaboration with your staff to develop for people to understand. But you'll see what I mean when we get to that point. And then we'll go over the assignments for 4, which are pretty simple and straightforward. And then that'll be it for tonight. So first, let's talk about your dissertation discussion. When we start, I'm going to put you into two groups, and I'll keep this on the screen that you should be able to see. I want you to each of you to discuss the current status of your topic. Usually by this point, it begins to evolve. And hopefully it evolves in a direction that becomes much more focused and narrowed. I want the peers in the group to ask some probing questions. Like, how do you know this is really a problem worthy of study? That's an important distinction. Now, the incorrect answer is because I see this happen in my everyday world. That may be true, but you need to pick a problem that at least others in the research world has also identified as a problem. There may not be a lot of great research out there about it, but there needs to be some data to support your assumption. For example, I'll use Robin Rivera, that just happened to come to mind. I know she's going to do something on dyslexia. It's apparent that there is a gap between the pedagogical or instructional understanding of how to deal with dyslexia and where teacher capacities really are. So she's got some research to support that. And many others, you've got different things that if you're a young lady that's doing her defense for me, I'm chairing her dissertation. She's doing it in 2 weeks. She chose a topic where she made kind of an assumption that even before the pandemic, that there's a gap between the skills and capacities necessary to develop online courses and what professors typically have. And the research became very clear as she was looking through that there is a wide gap. And then we narrowed that down into to what extent the universities use adult learning principles in order to close that gap. So there's another example. So there's got to be some larger than your own circle, local circle basis for the problem that you want to study. Peers ask questions from, have you considered this? Have you considered that? And then finally, probably the most important part is, what issues or challenges will you encounter in the data gathering process? And how will you overcome these? That's a real critical thing, especially we're dealing with some issues right now with students that are doing qualitative studies that depend on observations. And in our current pandemic situation with social distancing, they're running into some issues on that. And it involves timing of when you can get finished. So those are things that you need to, these are new variables that we've never had to deal with before in regard to being able to get to your data. We think that we've got some workarounds on it, but it's more challenging than it used to be. And of course, take notes on your feedback, and then when we come back together, we'll want to do some sharing on that. So with that, I'm going to stop share for the moment and break us into groups. What I love about Zoom. So here we go. I'm going to break you into it. And one thing I love about Zoom is I can break in and out. I can send a text to all the groups at the same time, so or a chat. So here we go. Matt, are you there?
My screen, I would show it to you, but I don't know how to do that.
Helby, okay, I couldn't see the
You
slide
want-
that you had left up, Dr. Helby.
Okay, I'm going to put that back up. See if I can do that. Here we go.
Is there anyone who?
Does that allow you to see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Thank you. And how much time did you give us to
You know,
have
I did not, and I think I'll text that out real quick because I didn't say it. Let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 each group. How many is in your group? 4? We'll go 30 minutes. 30 minutes total.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, good. Okay, is there anyone who would like to go first into discussing their dissertation?
Yeah, I'll go first.
Okay. And
Class.
I
I'm in
will-
class. Okay, so
I'm
hello.
gonna give you there's about 5, maybe like 3 to 4, about 3 minutes to explain it, and then we can have 2 minutes of discussion of it. Will that
Okay,
work?
that's fine.
That work for
Yes.
everyone?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. Nyla, you're on the clock.
Okay, so since the first class, my thought process was to do my dissertation on teacher perceptions. Well, at first it was like teacher perceptions towards DAEP, black males and DAEP. But now I think I'm just going to do teacher perceptions towards African American male students, not necessarily in a DAEP program, but just overall, just the entire teacher perceptions. And I don't know, do I supposed to answer these questions that we have? So, okay, so based on my campus, I've noticed being in the DAP program, I've noticed a distinct difference in regards to the number of office referrals that students receive per student demographics. And it appears to be that the African American students have more referrals coming through the office. And with that number, it's more of the African American male students. Some of the referrals that we see are like, we have different levels, level 1, level 2, level 3. And a lot of them are like level 1s and level 2s, where there are issues where the teacher can actually take care of those within the classroom. And then as I was doing my observations for Dr. Gaffner's class, when I went to the classrooms, I saw that a lot of students, black males, they were getting in trouble for some of the same things that some of the other students were doing, but the teacher basically kind of was harder on them than the other students. And so I did notice that as I did my observation for that class. And so I just want to kind of dig into the culture of my campus to just see how we could change or how we can improve the perceptions that some teachers have towards these students. So that's my topic.
Okay, great. Anybody have any questions?
I do. This is Vicky.
Besides
So
Dr.
how do
Hill.
you, besides me?
Besides you, Dr. Hill.
I
Okay.
do.
I'll
I
wait.
do. It's
I'll
Vicky.
wait. I'll wait.
Yeah, I want him to ask his questions. So go ahead,
know.
Vicki.
We know, but you always want to start with people who don't know a lot first, because then we feel intimidated.
Well, I'm sorry that is never my intention.
No,
Go
not
ahead,
for you. Go ahead, Victoria. It's the process. It's the protocol.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Well, it just seems like instead of narrowing your scope, it sounds like you've widened it back up.
Did I?
Yes, because it was very much about people, the students in DAEP, and I was actually going to mention, have you considered DAEP and JJAEP, because it will narrow your scope even more, but I'm also curious as to whether you're looking at the ethnicity or race of the teachers and the administrators that are handling those discipline issues.
Those are good questions, and I'll answer that for you. Yes, I did look into the race of the teacher in regards to those teachers that are writing those referrals. And then, yes, I did look at the administration as well. Now, from what I did in Dr. Gaffner's class in regards to the administration, it'll look totally different this year because we have a whole new administration team, except for one administrator. So the research I did and the data I came up with for Dr. Gaffner's class might look a little different as opposed to this coming school year, if we even have students. I mean, hopefully we'll have some students sometime, but if we do have students, that data will probably look a little bit different, because not only will we have a new administration team, but we also have 64 new teachers coming into the building as well. So it's going to look a lot different than what it was with Dr. Gaffner's class. And then with you telling me that
I just wanted to answer to that might give you more information if the kids have not changed and you're looking at the same students with different perspectives from the backgrounds of the administrators and the teachers. That gives you more information to work with.
And before we add someone else, think gonna look how are you gonna apply it to your campus. So basically, it's not new, but it's fairly new. Okay.
So I think the last question was, what issues or challenges might you encounter while you're gathering data?
So Matt basically addressed is the qualitative part. So my question to Dr. Helvey, he's on here right now, was basically what are some avenues that I can use, or what avenue do I need to take, or what are some avenues I need to take or think about to make it more quantitative?
I just got in on your last sentence, so you have to tell me again what you're.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So we were talking about, I'm still going to focus on with social emotional learning, but I'm going to look at teachers' perception of social emotional learning in the reading curriculum. And so, and I just changed that because of a meeting we had yesterday. I just added the reading curriculum part on there. And so one of the questions that Matt asked me was, it sounds like it's going to be mostly qualitative because I'm asking about teachers' perception. So that's the challenge that I may face, that part.
Yeah, because the other option is to gather data on perceptions from a large data set. And when we say large, let me give you an example. Shannon Stoker, I mentioned her. She's about to do her defense. She did a descriptive quantitative study. Descriptive simply means that she developed, with help from other sources, several research questions that probe into perceptions of things. In this case, it was 3 research questions regarding professors' perceptions of the extent to which universities used adult learning principles, the extent to the universities gave them a choice, gave them some voice into their online work. Basically, long story short, she had a series of survey questions, and the only thing we used SPSS to do was to analyze the descriptives of those to just pull out frequencies. And then her conclusions in chapter 4, she wrote it all up in chapter 4, and her conclusions in chapter 5 amount to X percentage of university professors said this about their development to develop online courses. And then she connected that to the change to the conceptual framework or theoretical framework, which she used, and connected that to each research question and validated whether the research question was answered or not with that. Long story short, yes, it can be done. You just got to make sure. Now, she got like 150 professors, which is pretty good. She went out to almost every four-year university, public or private, out there, because it didn't really matter since she was trying to get individual professor perceptions. You could do a similar thing, but it's sometimes challenging to get teachers to return on those surveys. You really can't use the statistical amount of sample size for this kind of because if you did that, it's nearly impossible to get that number. So does that help answer your question?
Yes, it did. It
did. I mean, it's possible. It is. If you can get enough returns on your survey, it's a pretty good study to do because you're looking at patterns in their perceptions. Now, I am curious, and I know there's others that probably need to talk. On what basis are you connecting social emotional learning with literacy?
What do you mean by what do you mean by that? So are you asking specifically?
Is there some known correlation between social emotional learning and variances in literacy?
Oh, yes. Okay. So one of the things, as I was telling them yesterday, this young lady, and I just actually added that reading curriculum on yesterday. We had this keynote speaker yesterday, and she was basically saying, when students come back, they're going to need social and emotional learning and learning how to deal with what's going on in this world. And so what she said was, you can actually embed that in the reading curriculum by talking about perseverance, talking about self-management, relationship skills. So when she said that, that's when I added the reading curriculum piece. And that was based on basically the keynote speaker from yesterday.
Okay, you just bumped my thinking on something that may help you, because now that you talked through that, Elena Guerrero, she just did her proposal, I think, last Friday, and she was using Camburn's. Are you familiar with Camburn's literacy steps?
No.
Well, she was using that as a basis for, it was a basis for differentiating how reading strategies are, I guess what I'm trying to say is male and female students, it was a gender study, and how, but a lot of things from that, I wish I could articulate it better, but a lot of things that you've mentioned are in that Camburn. It's CAMBOURNES. Look that up.
BOU.
BOUCAMBO. Okay, Camborn. BOURNE is there's Camber's literacy steps. If I get a chance, or if you'll send me an email, I'll send you her proposal.
Okay, perfect.
And you'll see it. So it may give you some ideas.
Yeah, because I just added the literacy piece based on speaker yesterday.
Yeah. So.
And I want to jump in, Danielle. I didn't realize that we had very similar. We need to connect because my topic or my research study was teachers' perception of social, emotional, and behavioral needs that impact learning of African American males.
Okay.
And so I didn't realize that we were that close. Yours is going the area of content in terms of reading, and then mine is more of the behavioral needs. And I guess that's the part, that was the purpose of mine, looking at those needs not being met and how they impact their learning. And specifically, like you said, gender-based, this was for the male, from African American males.
Yeah.
So you may need that as well, that Camburn literacy steps. Okay. I mean, well, it may give you some insight on something.
Yeah.
So Danielle, also since you're kind of in the process of developing some of the stuff that you're going to use, a resource that we have used, that we use.
Hey, Dr. Helby, you're back.
I'm back.
Give feedback to Nyla, and then Rachel's going to mention hers really quickly, so you can give her feedback. We just give her feedback. So go ahead, Dr. Helby.
What am I giving feedback on?
Nyla was the first one.
And remind me again, Nyla, what was yours?
Okay, Dr. Helby. After Victoria bringing me to my senses, I'm going back to what I originally started to do.
This was behavior, right? Differences in teacher, variances in teacher interaction between black males and it was discipline, right?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So, like teacher perceptions on African American male students in a DAEP program.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my first thought is you have substantial evidence that this is a problem worthy of study. You're going to have I mean, your literature review is going to be pretty rich on this.
Right.
Because you've got all the data showing the variances in underachievement in test scores, in
Right.
over identification into special ed,
Right.
over placement into over suspension, over expulsion, over placement in AEP. So there's a substantive amount of data to show this is a problem worthy of study. So you're looking at teacher perceptions,
Yes.
or you're going to be observing for what are the observations that indicate differences in disciplinary strategies with Black males, right?
Right.
Well, and other students, the variances between the two. Okay, then that's a great study.
And so, of course, some of this will involve, the majority of this will involve interviews as well as observations. And then I'm considering looking at numbers and compare them to the different demographics as to the behavior, the behaviors that warranted a referral or the behaviors that warranted entrance into the DAP program, and to kind of see, yeah, and just to kind of see like how does the balance beam fall? Is it unleveled or is it level, or is there some type of difference in regards to the types of referrals that are coming through for the African American boys as compared to other demographics?
Have you considered a quantitative study where you just use Texas Education Agency data looking for those correlations on all of the disciplinary information that we gather on students, because we've got years of that?
I considered it
That would
for
get
Dr. Gaffner. I considered it for Dr. Gaffner's class, but I thought that would be a little bit too much for that particular time frame. But that could be something that I could look into in regards to my dissertation.
Well, that's what we're talking about.
Yes. So that's what I'm saying. Yes, I can.
Well, I guess
I don't
what
know.
I'm
I don't know if I should do qualitative or quantitative,
Yeah.
or if I should do a combination of both.
Well, I wouldn't recommend a combination of both. That's a lot of work. But I mean, we do have some that do mixed methods. But I just know when you started going down the road of we know these gaps exist. But I don't know how much research we've really done on pointing out the dispositions that are handed out in relation to race. There may be a lot out there, but I mean, we know that we know there's some huge discrepancies. But I don't know. It'd be something that I'd continue to talk with you about. If you wanted the possibility of escaping having to do any observations whatsoever, it might be an idea for you. So,
to do quantitative?
If you did a quantitative where you were looking at historical data from Texas Education Agency, which is accessible, you just simply run, I mean, your study would be based on, you're looking for, is there a relationship between this point A and point B? You'd probably have several research questions, but they're very straightforward research questions. Is there a relationship between disciplinary alternative education placement and, ethnicities, male of the, and then you'd have your list of ethnicities. It the challenge would be the setup, but once you got the setup, you just run it with SPSS and you'd be good to go. So it's a thought. So
Well, thank you, Dr. Helvey. I'll be in contact with you. I don't want to take up everybody's time.
no, that's all right. Where are you guys done?
No, there's still two of us.
Okay, I'm leaving then. So y'all, all right. I'm gonna go to the other room.
Dang, Dr. Gelby.
I'm going
Dr. Helby, you coming back?
Well, I can come down with somebody if you got a question
Oh,
or I
okay.
want to listen. Who hadn't gone yet?
Okay. Me and Victoria.
All right, I want to hear you.
Okay, I'll go real fast, Victoria. So mine was about how I still wanted to go with a quantitative study and looking at how effective the preparation is for teachers to teach in urban schools.
Oh.
But what I have decided to do with that is I wanted to, my undergrad was at an HBCU, and many of our HBCUs are actually in communities with urban schools. And so I wanted to look at really how effective are HBCUs doing with preparing teachers to teach in the neighborhoods which are urban neighborhoods, most of them, and from their preparation programs, how effective are they in preparing teachers to teach in urban schools?
Okay.
So I'm trying to bring it a little bit further in.
So I'm going to come back to the first question.
Okay.
Why is this a problem worthy of study?
Well, I have looked at the data, and we find that many, especially first year, or what they consider novice teachers between 1 and 3 years, will say that they're not necessarily prepared to teach in an urban community for several reasons. Poverty, they don't understand the demographics, and the demographics is not necessarily about race, but it could be in some instances, but a lot of it is about poverty, sometimes the trauma of a student, and that they haven't been exposed necessarily.
Is it a correct assumption that HBCU colleges are focusing more on developing urban educators? Is that assumption correct? Than a non-HBCU university?
Well, so I'm glad you're asking that. Not that I'm aware of. I have not been able to find a lot of data on an HBCU versus a non-HBCU. I think my initial concern was we're in the same communities where the kids look like them, and so are we prepared?
Yeah. But my point is,
I don't know if they're doing a better job of any than.
Yeah, which was kind of why I was wondering why you wanted to focus there. I mean, I do understand the connection, but I'm trying to get my head around. Well, the first problem is that I think is more than likely that you got to look at. Is there a need? And this is a rhetorical question, but there needs to be some research to back up what I'm about to say.
Okay.
Rhetorical question: is there a need for colleges and universities in general in the teacher preparation program to better prepare educators for an urban environment? Pure and simple. I think the answer to that is yes. And part of your literature review would be the substantive amount of students that are in urban environments. They're
Right.
It's the majority in the nation. I'm trying to make that connection to a specific type of university unless you were to compare universities that are serving future educators that will work in those versus elsewhere. So I think it's a great study. I do. I think it's a great idea because, well, like for example, our master's program here that we designed, the online master's, all of our literature and our objectives are focused on leading urban education leaders, which is why the resources that I use and things like that are primarily from that body of literature. So,
Tiffany.
Well, I think too, when I looked at like Texas Southern's in Houston, and it looked at some of their courses for their teacher prep program, and they have some specific for urban education.
yeah.
A few, which is what the literature also says, even when you think about a standard for education prep programs, there's standards all over the place, and they can say they deal with like diversity, but what does that really mean? And so you may have a class here or there, but are we truly what? And I know then it says, well, what does that look like?
I'm wondering this. I just thought of something.
Okay.
What if you were to somehow identify colleges and universities that are doing an exceptional job of preparing educators for an urban community, and we're to and I don't know what those are or what that criteria would be, but I'm sure there's some type of criteria.
Okay.
And you were to study them on what is it that they're doing that seem to correlate with successful educators. I don't know. It's just a thought.
You trying to take me into a qualitative study?
I know. Look at him. Tiffany and Dr. Helby.
Well, your other ones, I was having a hard time going quantitative with your other idea.
Well, we talked about that because I looked at TEA, the data. And
what data would you be looking at?
Well, initially you could look at you could look at like the satisfaction that the principals from the principal survey, really like a perception. But my thought is, and what is I've talked to people, that survey doesn't necessarily assess for the type of skills we might.
No, that's what I was.
So then can I send out surveys?
Well, yeah, sure you can. Yeah.
Okay. There you go, Dr. Helby. Come on, work with me so I can keep it.
Yeah, sure you can. Sure you can. Yeah.
Tiffany.
Yes.
And in your what you were talking about, to give you a real life example of that, like I attended Privy, which is an HBCU for my undergrad, right?
Right. I'm Texas Southern.
Okay. And I've worked in Stop 6, which is one of the low socioeconomic areas here in Fort Worth. I've worked with many of my other counterparts who went to, Harvard, TCU, UNT, several PWIs, and they couldn't last. They were awesome teachers, but they couldn't last in that Stop 6 environment. And if you look on the flip of that, I look at TCU or Texas Wesleyan. We have great teachers who come out of there, and they may teach at Alice Carlson or Tanglewood, and they're great teachers for that school. So it is kind of, I see where you're trying to tie in the HBCU concept of it, but it's kind of like, how do you get that data? Like, yeah, you can give me a survey, you can give other HBCUs, but will teachers be candid and honest with you on that? Like I look at an Alice Carlson teacher, awesome teacher. But if you take those teachers and take them to Stop 6, they wouldn't make it a day. I'm not saying they're not qualified.
No.
They're not good teachers, because they're great teachers.
Not taking it. Yeah.
It's just, can they handle that type of environment?
Yeah. Well, and more than likely, their student teaching experience
Yes.
did not prepare them.
Which is what the literature says.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The student teaching.
Yeah.
So it's not even necessarily where you came from necessarily, because you may have come from, there, and yes, your experience, but if I didn't come from that community and I'm still in that community, I may look like them, but that doesn't mean I'm going to do well.
Exactly.
Yeah, your theoretical framework's heavy on social identity theory. Yeah. So.
Okay, I'm sorry I took up the time, Victoria.
No, that's good. That's good. I'm gonna move on to the other room real quick. We've only got a couple of minutes.
Okay, give us 5. Give us 5, Dr. Hill.
5 minutes. You need 5 minutes? All right.
Okay. All right, Vic.
I just interviewed last week, so I'm in the midst of the process of getting, transferred over to the other department.
Dr. Helvey, we had gone over ours. We lost Sean in May, so they were in the process, and
Did
they
both- okay, let me see where they are. Maybe I can get them.
I think they were having internet connection issues.
All right. Matt. Yeah, they're not showing anywhere now. Yeah.
Yeah, Sean said she was going to reboot her whole computer to see if
Yeah.
it come back on.
We were just
Yeah.
discussing that's going to be our, that's just one of those challenges that we have to.
Yeah. 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 Matt still shows to be in, but he's not showing up.
No,
at-
Matt's here.
I'm here. I'm good.
Oh, okay, Matt's back. Okay,
I had
all
something
right.
that's going on in my house. I just muted myself for a
Oh,
second.
okay. Oh, sure.
May,
Okay.
it's not
It
showing
was
up.
May.
Mhm.
May was in the midst of talking, and then she just went silent, and now she's on
Yes.
mute.
Okay.
So while we have a couple of minutes, Dr. Helvey, this is just kind of fresh off my mind kind of stuff. And I'm trying to think for my dissertation topic. Oh, there's May starting to see if we can hear her. And no, we can't hear you, May. Maybe you can hear us. You're muted, May.
Yeah, she shows to be muted.
Yeah. So, for my dissertation topic, the stuff with Fullen has got me really thinking about teacher capacity and
Mhm.
building. What does that look like to build teacher capacity? But really kind of relating it back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, considering what's going on with teacher capacity. And I don't know if this is fresh off my mind. I haven't really put much research or thought into it beyond what would it look like to consider asking teachers to do creative thinking, designing lessons, designing work, and then what does that look like considering Maslow's hierarchy of needs and their capacity to actually do that work.
Oh, okay. You need to look into Phil Slechty's work.
I have a lot.
Yeah.
I've been trained by his.
Yeah.
The Downies are have trained me in a lot of his stuff already. So
Yeah.
that's one place that I would look and work out of.
His of course, I mean his original book, Working on the Work.
Mm-hmm.
Alan November's very much. Now, the thing I would say about Alan is this stuff is not real focused, and he hasn't written in a long time. People still bring him around, pay him a lot of money to do his speech thing, but that's been his whole focus. Yang Zhao.
Mm-hmm.
But Phil actually put a framework together,
right?
For I mean, his primarily focus, as you know, was engagement.
Right.
But trying to think of some other resources. But that's a great idea. To me, it's a great idea because that is in the forefront of what we should be doing. In fact, that's kind of what when we do the global class. Are you in the global class? Or have you already had that this fall?
No, I haven't yet.
Okay. Seemed like several of you were in the global class. We're using Tony Wagner's The Global Achievement Gap, but a lot of the information is about this gap of building capacity with students. Well, you need to build capacity with adults first.
Yeah. On
what it means to be creative. I'm reading a book right now that just came out that might be worthy of looking at. It's by Dan Heath. It's called Upstream. Dan Heath written all kinds of it. But it's about thinking is what it is. It's about looking at things, a few steps ahead and that kind of thing. But I think that's a great idea.
So data collection.
The research question is going to surround the idea of to what extent are educators, what extent do they have the capacity for, you could do a descriptive if you could find the instrument. That's the key. If you could find an instrument out there with Gallup or somebody that has done the research or has built some tools for this, you could create your own survey and I think test for the extent to which teachers feel they are capable of creativity. That's a good idea, actually. I hadn't thought
How
about
do
that one before. Go ahead,
And then
Rob.
the definition of creativity, how do you define, how do you define creativity?
That would be part of the challenge.
That would be part
Yeah.
of it.
but
And
that would be a good part of the literature review.
Mhm.
Is
Well, and I think I
establishing.
would use, oh gosh, his name just left me. He's the guy that talks about creativity a whole lot. He's got a couple of TED Talks. He's from England.
Oh, that's Sir Ken Robinson.
Ken Robinson.
Oh,
Ken
I
Robinson.
would use his definition is
Yeah.
essentially,
Yeah.
creative thought is not
Yeah.
just arts.
Yeah.
And
And what was his book? I can't remember. Never mind. I'll look
that's
it
a
up.
great source.
Yeah, but there's I think there's enough out there for the literature
Yeah.
review. I would
Yeah.
have to target my
Yeah.
research appropriately.
And part of it could be, to what extent did their educator prep programs, to what extent did their professional development that they're getting ongoing. So you could have, I can think of 3 research questions right away. The reason it's worthy of study for me is you're going to have a lot of literature on what is needed with student outcomes and what kind of pedagogy it would take for that to be realized. And then you're testing for, to what extent are teachers prepared for that pedagogy? Yeah. And you could do a quantitative on that, because I think you could put an instrument together, because you're not necessarily what you're testing for is capacity.
Mm-hmm.
You're not testing on whether they're actually, your assumption here is there's a lack of capacity there. I think you could find enough literature to say, yeah, there's a lack of capacity, a lack of training. What are you going to call it? Good stuff. I like that.
Okay.
All right. I think I'm going to do the 1 minute count right now. Just when I close all the rooms, it's going to give you 1 minute. I'm going to broadcast that. Closing rooms now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, are we back?
Yes. We're gradually coming back here.
Okay. When we finish conversations on some of the groups, I'm just glad to be logging back in. It kicked me out.
I know.
And I wasn't able to hear or talk, but I think it has something to do with my Microsoft account with Fort Worth ISD, as well as Texas Westland's Blackboard account, because I did a Blackboard password reset today to do parent link and call outs. And ever since then, I haven't been able to log back into RAM Link Blackboard. So I'm going to have to call somebody tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I heard lots of great conversation. Let's do a little sharing here. Somebody tell us if you've got any new insights today and what that might be.
My new insight is bring it in a little bit. I'm way too broad. So my group told me from my original topic, I was probably at about 30 years in the program. And then now they brought me down to a reasonable amount.
There you go. First of all, we're pretty proud. It should take, by the time you propose, it should take, let's say you propose in, let's say January. you should be defending by September. It should work like that. Unless you've chosen a methodology that's just so big and so onerous that you can't get around it all. That's where the rubber meets the road, is you've got to really narrow down that methodology, and you've got to balance that practical with the expansiveness of the study. And always try to lean towards what's practical. What data can I really get to? Others, new insights, thoughts, ahas.
Matt, you had some good insights with Dr. Helvey.
He did. Yeah, I hadn't thought of a study like that. But go ahead, Matt. Kind of give him
Okay.
a quick.
I didn't mean to
view.
throw you under the bus or anything.
That's okay. That's okay. I was, so my thought, and this was literally like today kind of thought, but one of the things that we run into, especially when we're asking teachers to design lessons, is capacity to be able to do that and do it at a high level. Excuse me. And creative thought, to be able to use the creative thought to be able to do that. So the program that I'm in is a STEM program, and we ask teachers to kind of design PBLs and different other types of lessons. They're outside the norm. And if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you think about kind of where things are going right now, if a teacher doesn't have the capacity, whether it's in the physical realm or in just the, I don't know, just the pedagogy to be able to do that, how does that affect them being able to think creatively, and how does that affect them being able to design lessons? So, really looking at teachers' capacity as it relates to creative thought. And Dr. Helvey gave me a lot of different authors to look at, some of which I'm familiar with, some of which I'm not. And even threw out some questions, some research questions that could possibly be looked at, because it's a need right now, because we're asking teachers to do something that they've never done before. And so how do they respond to that? And what capacity do they have to actually be able to do that?
I just thought of something else on that. One line of research questions, you're probably going to find that under the theoretical framework, somewhere in there, student engagement is going to be central to the connection between creativity of the educator and student engagement, put it that way. Some of those Gallup student engagement studies might be, I'm just looking online here. Sir Ken Robinson's written Out of Our Minds, The Power of Being Creative. This one looks directly related to that. Creative Schools, The Grassroots Revolution That's Transforming Education. Lots of good stuff out there.
I see lots of book readings in my future.
Yeah, there's just a ton of information out there, but I don't think there's much on what you are particularly be testing for.
Right. And I think that's going to be the big deal, is narrowing down enough to be able to say, here's
God, I like
where it
that.
actually fits.
And you've got, it's one of those, if we create an instrument and get it out there to enough people, I think you'd have enough for a good quantitative view on that. So, anybody else? One more. All right. Okay, we are going to move forward to monitoring and assessing. Okay. One of the things that I've noticed, and in my work as a consultant, I noticed it as well, but I noticed it as a superintendent. One of the things that's not common is systems for monitoring and assessing how we're doing on the initiatives that we develop. And we do a good job of diagnosing essentially we've become pretty adept at, since the 80s anyway, and particularly early 90s, at determining outcomes through test scores. And we tend to look at the test scores as the major indicator of whether our initiatives are working or not. The problem with that is it's difficult, as you know, when you probably, if any one of you have thought about a dissertation topic that was somehow connected to test scores, is very difficult to identify one specific variable that has a major impact on test scores, because there are so many variables that go into that, and it makes it difficult to determine to what extent any initiative, practice, pedagogy, or strategy that we're doing is actually working. And there's another dimension to this too. We tend to not, and I'm speaking generally, but I think there's some accuracy to it. We tend to not value measuring process all that much. We tend to value more of the outcome a lot, but not the process. And the reason I bring all of this up is because you're going to have a section in your project about monitoring and assessing change. And the way to monitor, and we're not talking about looking at some type of test scores that occurred. We're looking at, okay, what is it we want to change, and how will we determine whether the change is occurring or not, whether the culture is changing or not. Let me get this out of my way here. Like I said, we are conditioned to primarily consider outcomes, like test scores as primary, and too many initiatives creating a time-consuming and cumbersome accountability process is possible. And there's a lack of good tools and the capacity to develop the good tools. So what I want to do is show you an example of what this might look like. I did this as an assistant superintendent because I don't know, it was something I liked doing. It was something, and it tends to depend on the governance of the organization. If you have corporate-minded school board members, for example, corporate-minded school board members tend to not necessarily want all the details. They want to see a big summary of, okay, how are we doing? And more importantly, they want to know, how do you know how we're doing? And I was fortunate to work with some boards like that. So they were very interested and influential. Well, basically, they were telling us, we need some tools where we can look at that from our level and determine that we're moving forward with our particular initiatives, whatever they might be. And then what progress we're making as a result of those initiatives. So what I want you to do in your project is to develop a section on how you're going to monitor and assess the change. And after I show you some tools that I'm using, I'll use one particular school district that, the fact is, I spent time online with their team this afternoon at Eagle Mountain Saginaw, of going over the new ones they're going to use for their new strategic plan. But then I want to hear from you on what kinds of things you may have encountered, or what are your ideas, just your perspective on these kinds of things. So I'm going to stop share here, and I'm going to bring up I'll take that back. No, I want to go over a couple more things. I'm sorry. Let's start back to share again there. Share. I use this book as kind of a basis for helping school districts monitor and assess change. And the book is by Jane Davidson. It's called Actionable Evaluation Basis. And one of the reasons I used it is because it's really simple. It's not all cumbersome. It doesn't take a lot of in-depth thought or capacity to do it, but it gives some really good points on how you develop a monitoring and assessing system to determine how you're doing. So here's kind of a framework that, or really it's more of a kind of the steps of monitoring change. A clear purpose, and I'm going to show you in a document that I created for Eagle Mountain where it's got that clear purpose. The right engagement, meaning the right people are the ones involved in developing the monitoring, assessing data for that. They're asking the important questions. They use evidence to support their answers. They're going to do really succinct reporting, and I'll show you again the document that we'll use. And then ultimately, there should be some insights from that. Those insights could be test scores. They could be a low turnover rate of teachers. They could be an increase in creativity capacity of staff, depending on whatever your particular initiative is. So I'm going to show you some examples of what I'm talking about. And you probably encountered something like this. And most of this stuff, like I said, the best stuff I've seen is homemade. So let's start with, here we go. Now this is just an Excel file. And I'm going to go over a lot of the, okay, I need to get out of that one. That's not the one I want. The working copy right there. You'll notice down at the bottom here, there's 1.1.1, 1.1.2. This particular district has identified 8 things that they want to do over the next 5 years. And here's what we're talking about. So in this area, which is teaching and learning, they want to implement a comprehensive and rigorous pre-K through 12 curriculum that is supported by a coherent and aligned assessment system. Okay, that's their strategy. That's what they want to do. Then they ask their teams of teachers and other staff members to develop steps toward achieving that. So they develop the steps, 1, 2, 3, 4. In this case, there's 8 steps. Now, what they're going to do now is they're going to, in each of these areas, and I actually got this out of Davidson's book, but they liked it and wanted to adopt it. They wanted a system where they can measure process. So these indicators that they're going to put in, and I'll show you an example of what one looks like that was filled out from their last strategic plan. These indicate where they think they should be at each of these stages. And here are the stages: planning, emerging, developed, and proficient. Proficient would be like the final stage. Now, what the people that are in charge with each one of these strategies will do, and the district will assign the people responsible for it, they're going to start at proficient. They're going to say, okay, I'm going to look at this right here. And this says provide time, opportunity, and processes for teachers to collaborate in order to best understand, implement, and review curriculum and best practices. They're going to start over here at proficient, and they're going to do a small narrative that says, here's what proficient looks like. And they've got a guide down here to go have. That means 90 to 100% of whatever tasks, actions, indicators, or processes are in place and operating at high levels. So they're going to start there, and then they're going to back the rubric back, and they call it a rubric, which is essentially what it is, all the way back to planning. And what this will do is, if you'll see all of these, there's actually 17 of their action plans within 8 strategies. This is going to culminate into a summary document that they show to their board. So here's where we are on these things. Now there's another product to the summary is out here. They'll begin to look at, okay, they're going to ask, the most important thing you need to do after you've done your change process for a while is ask the so what question. If you felt like it was important to do something, what result did you get? If it was a culture that says we want to get better at teaching online, well, what are you going to use to measure whether you got better or not? Those are kinds of things you need to discuss. So I show you this just to say, this is an example of something that could be developed in your change process. There are already tools out there, and I might think of, if I recall, a couple of you have already used some of your own examples, so it won't be anything new to you. But in your assessment and monitoring process, I want you to describe a process, and if you have a tool or want to include a tool, that would be great for monitoring this. The main thing is you're going to have to get collaboration for people to make sure they have buy-in. You can't just fill this out yourself and go hand to the teachers and say, okay, go do this. Well, yeah, they might do that, but they're going to do it with much more, they're going to be inspired to do it if they actually help fill in these boxes. Now, a cool part of the tool that I do for people is once they get, they're looking at this, and once they get to another level, All they got to do is hit that. And let's say they get there, all they developed. And then that changes. When they get all the way to the end, that's the top level. There's a flag there that'll show up. And once they do, and they monitor this all along. And I guess I show you this just to say, it's really important that anytime you put together a change initiative, call it a strategic plan, whatever it is that you want to see an organizational change, you need to design some type of rubric so your staff can monitor themselves on how are we doing on this. This could be part of your PLCs of looking at bringing this up, say every couple of weeks or every 3 weeks. Okay, here's where we're supposed to be doing this and how are we doing on that. So this will break into a summary document. Pretty easy. It's just an Excel spreadsheet for people to use. You know, so that's the reason I show it, is I want you to be thinking, be creative. You can do it any way you want to. You can just do a narrative if you want to of how you're going to, because there's other ways than just doing this. You might be doing walkthroughs. You might be doing some type of observations. You might be doing focus groups. There are lots of different ways to assess where you are on any particular thing. So let me hear from you guys. What kinds of things are you using? What kinds of things have you experienced as you look at monitoring and assessing the things that are going on in your organization?
Would that not be the same as a tip for targeted improvement school planning?
Could be, yeah. You could use that. To what extent is everybody involved in that?
Well, it depends on the rating of the campus. If it's a lower rating for the campus on accountability, then all parties and all stakeholders are involved in that.
Who developed the strategies?
The administrators of the campus, after doing a needs assessment and getting input from the staff and all other stakeholders.
Okay. That would be very similar.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there typically on things that are mandated, is the framework of strategies kind of mandated?
Yes.
Okay. See, this, to me, this would be, yeah, it would be the same. It would work. Yeah.
The framework is mandated, but the targeted areas are not.
You can locally develop that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Others?
Would one be like our say our district assesses every year in the fall and then in the spring, because we designed these are the goals that as relates to where we want to be as a district in our climate and culture, because then that is a major change. And
you mean like the surveys they put out?
Yeah, but you got to be in the 5th quintile, but third, then things underneath. Do you think is your
I think
campus headed in the same direction, and what are your top 3 priorities, because they should align with the districts?
Yeah, I don't know that necessarily, that could be a tool that you would include as part of it, but I don't know that it really measures your process. You know, if you put a step out there, just say, staff, we're going to start doing this, and whatever this is. And then you put some steps in place to get there. I don't know that those types of tools get down to that level of, okay, how what are we doing how well are we doing in the areas or the processes we said we were going to do. If we said we're going to improve our use of technology, and we put 6 things that we need to make sure we do in order to leverage technology to a high level in the classroom. it's again, I'm emphasizing it's more of looking at the change process and see if you're making progress there versus your total outcome.
So Dr. Helvey, I would like
Then
to
if
jump
somebody's
in.
putting that in there, when they have those, are they even measuring? I mean, I guess that would be the question.
What do you mean? I
Like,
understand.
well, so we have a long-term technology plan, and so it's that everyone would be one-to-one, right?
Okay.
You can have them at
Okay.
your campus, but that doesn't mean the students actually have them, right?
Well, I mean, if you define one-to-one, everybody has one.
Or they're there, but so that's what I'm saying. What would be that measurement if that's one of the ones we're going to one? Well, what would be the measurement? Because
If that was your strategy, then you would have achieved that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That you've gotten them on campus. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if that was your strategy, you would say, yeah, because if your strategy is something just technical, we're going to put a computer in every kid's hands. You can accomplish that.
Yeah, but with theirs, it's a whole list of them. That's just one. But you would just be through.
But if it was a little higher level, in regard to what extent are teachers utilizing the aspect of one-to-one, and then you said, or your strategy was, I don't know, just some strategy related to pedagogy and a one-to-one. If you set out a strategy and say, okay, we're going to be able to do this. If your strategy that you've decided only takes one step, it's not a real difficult strategy. So I wouldn't necessarily consider that something that's really, it may need to happen, but I mean, it's just like.
I think it's a step within the technological literacy plan.
Yeah, it probably is. Yeah.
Yeah, like a 5-year, 6-year plan.
Because there's certainly like social distancing. So, okay, we're going to make sure everybody's 6 feet apart. Well, that's like a one-step plan, Well, I mean, there may be steps you have to put stickers on the floor or something like that. But other, the larger scale types of strategies, just like that one I read off from there, that's going to take several things to implement. Somebody else was about to say something.
Okay, Dr. Helvey, can I jump in?
Yes.
Okay, it was kind of short and choppy. I couldn't hear all of what you were saying. I heard some of what Tiffany was saying, but I want to go back to what Victoria talked about, which was the targeted intervention or improvement plan.
Yeah.
And so what we have found is that we see that with tier 4 and 5 campuses more, and we don't necessarily look at what are the things that are we making progress in certain areas with our tier 1 and 2, and kind of like what you mentioned earlier, we just focus on the results at the end in terms of stars. So the assumption is if the campus is a tier 1, 2, that they're doing all of those things correctly, and they're really not. There's no one measuring, some other components of.
I don't think you make a really good point, because it takes some leadership at the high level meaning board, superintendent, to say, even in places that we're not necessarily worried. Okay, put it that way. From a test, we tend to not worry about them. So and I understand, because I work with other school districts. Their board will say, you know what, that planning and those initiatives and things like that, that's what that superintendent and those people do. We're not worried about that. And again, that's a mindset of a school board. If there's more, like I mentioned before, if you've got a board that's a little more of a corporate mindset, they're interested in how the organization's doing, both qualitatively and quantitatively. And they want to see tools that you're using that make it succinct and simple for the entire world to look at and say, okay, Northwest ISD would call this a community-based accountability system. That's kind of become a new thing, I would say pre-pandemic anyway, of districts that are exactly like you've just described in schools that are, I mean, and face it, if you're in an affluent school, they don't look at test scores in the same way. They just assume test scores are going to be good, and they generally are because of the type of students that are there as far as what those students bring to the school versus what the school does for them. But so they tend to get complacent, if you will, because I see, I see campuses that are from a test score perspective may not be knocking the top, but I can guarantee education wise they're doing better than anybody I've ever seen because they're so focused on this. So, okay, questions on the assessment and monitoring. You're going to create a section on that. You're going to base that on, here's what my description of my culture change is going to look like. Here's the action plan or theory of action, whatever you're going to call it, kind of the same thing. Here's what we do. And then you got a section of, here's how I'm going to monitor and assess whether we're progressing in this. Questions on that?
I just want to clarify, this is for next week's section of the paper, or is it for this week's?
This is for next week's section of the paper. Good
Okay.
question. Good question. This week, all I want you to do, and Victoria, I'll point you out because you asked a question a day or so ago. Is it okay to use things you've already put in some of the assignments we've done? Absolutely. Don't reinvent the wheel. If you've already got a good description, I've given you feedback, it looks good, do it again. Just copy and paste that in there. Part of the thing I've learned with particularly, I think it's probably relevant to all types of instruction, but one of the things I learned in going through creating an online course was, if you've got a fairly major objective, build in things during the process to where it's not, you get to the end and okay, boom, do it. Build it in along the way. And that's what I'm trying to do here, is put in things as we move forward that are relevant to you, that are relevant to the objectives, that allow you to build it as we go. That way, when you turn in that final project, really all you've got left after this week is, once you do that first part, assignment 5, it counts as a regular assignment. I'm going to give you feedback. You put in that needs assessment part and monitoring assessing part, and you're pretty much done with that. I wanted to mention something. Rachel, would you mind sharing your bit of news you shared with me this week regarding a change project?
Yes. Okay, I had to unmute it. Yes, last Tuesday, I had the pleasure of presenting my change project, which was the full integration of virtual instruction for a few board members and administration. And I pretty much just shared with them how things would look like on the elementary level. And of course, we know the district has restructured, rezoned, and a lot of things are changing almost daily, as Sean right before we got on. But I was able to share some of my research and some of the ideas that I was able to bring out in my change project with those administrators. And a few of my ideas are actually going to be put to play.
All right.
So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I think that was great. That was great. I mean, because that's kind of what you're hoping for. Some of this stuff is relevant. It's something that you can use. And I know about 2 years ago, with the group of people I worked with schools, we got a new associate, Betty Burke's her name, and we were doing some executive leadership coaching, and one of the things we started realizing was how much the understanding of the change process needs to be reiterated so much with leaders, because that to me is a lot of times where they fail. I would say almost every principal that I've ever had to either reassign or coach to go away, which wasn't many, but there were a few. And that was the biggest issue, is they really did not understand how you needed to work through the adults with a change process. They love the kids, and so, okay, the kids are great, the adults are just in my way. Well, any principal that's doing that is probably not going to be a principal very long. Your lifeblood is the staff, so you've got to work through the adults, and you have to find joy working with those adults. So, any other questions? And again, and I'm going to reiterate, just like Victoria said, this is for next week to put on your final project. So, because you won't have an assignment next week, you'll just have the final project. So, and we're going to meet again on Tuesday night just to close down. So, all right. You got whole system improvement perusal. Some of you are already engaged in that, and I've been looking at some of that. So I enjoy seeing what you're saying and writing and all of that. You've got that assignment 5, which is the description of your project and your theory of action. Be sure to include, I put in there to make sure you look at on that rubric a needs assessment. Essentially that means is you need to indicate why is whatever change that you're looking at needed. Of course, some of it's going to be pretty easy if you're transforming to more of a virtual or online system. Obviously, there's an easy need for that. We're in a pandemic and we have to now. But others, you'll think of some things. So, anything else? All right, but it was great to talk with everyone, and y'all have a good week, and we'll see you on Tuesday night.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.